Hi and hello, watch fans, and welcome to another edition of the Real Time Show. I'm Aloma Joseph, your friendly neighborhood jeweler, and I'm very, very excited and honored because today on the show in the virtual studio, I have an even friendlier, even more handsome, and definitely more knowledgeable jeweler here with me. Welcome, Jeremy Oster.
Lon, thank you so very much. I'm thrilled to be on the Real Time Show. Congratulations on your success. The very kind words were obviously very kind, but that's all they were is kind, not exactly true. What you achieve is amazing, and you're doing phenomenal work. So I'm thrilled to be joining you.
I'm not only super excited to have you here because we're friends, but before we became friends, I was actually a huge fan of both you and your work. And most importantly, and I've been on record saying it several times, my journey into podcasting is thanks to you. You motivated me to start podcasting. I've done YouTube videos, but one day I stumbled upon Keeping Time, which is the podcast for Oster watches. And you inspired me so much that because of you, I started doing Ace Jewelers podcasts. I've done some with Rob Nuds, and later on that developed into the Real Time Show. So thank you, and all the credit goes to you because I've said this many times on air already.
Well, I appreciate that greatly. But really, the credit also goes to you. This is your personality, and your personality comes out because you reached out to me. We had not met. And that's one of the great things about the podcast is through it, I've actually met a lot of great people, as I'm sure you have as well. And it's funny, I know Rob as well. Shame he's not here with us. I'd love to be chatting with him. So it is a small world in the watch world, for sure, the jewelry world. And it's kind of lovely that we can all be together and join together and kind of make it a better place, unified.
I totally agree. Let's start at the beginning. You have an eloquent accent, so you have to be from the UK. But Oster Jewelers is now world-renowned in Denver, Colorado. So I'm super curious to hear your story.
All right. Well, so born in London, raised in London, left London when I was about 19 and moved to America because my parents were moving there. So the short version, lived in Miami for a few years and had a chance to move to Aspen on a whim. When you're 21, 22 years old, you say yes to those opportunities without thinking about them. So moved to Aspen, and Aspen, of course, in Colorado, beautiful ski area, just a beautiful area. Didn't really know what it was about, but at the time, it was just a wonderful opportunity. And that's where I got into the watch and jewelry business. And I needed a job, basically. It was that simple. But I got into it. And I fell in love with it. And it really didn't take very long. I just fell in love with it. And the first thing was I started to sell watches. And anything I sell, I want to know as much as possible about it. I have to be obsessed about it. And that's what I do. I read and read and read. And I learned about it. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And the more I knew, the more I realized I didn't know. And that's kind of how the obsession started. So I had some good opportunities there. And through there, I also met my wife, Melissa, and so we met in Aspen. And I lived in Aspen for about 12 years, and then we decided it was time to kind of leave and go to a different place. It started to get a bit too small for us, really, because it is isolated, beautiful as it is. And then we chose, obviously, Denver, Colorado, and that was 2002. When I quit my job in Aspen, I had no plan, really. I had absolutely no plan. And a friend of ours in the industry who had quit his job was running a very successful store to launch a website in those days. And that website became Time Zone. It was actually Richard Page. And I remember having dinner with him in San Francisco. And he told us, I asked him, what the hell were you thinking? Why would you quit your successful store to do something that you have no idea is ever going to make a penny? And he said when the Vikings would approach new land, they would set fire to their own ship. So they had no escape plan, no way to back out. You commit to winning. And those words kind of stuck in my head for a while. So when I was thinking about what we should do next up in Aspen, I realized I had to quit my job to be able to free myself to do exactly what I wanted to really achieve. So that was what kind of led to that and on. So then we were in obviously Denver, Colorado, and I'm very fortunate to have a wife who, instead of saying, no, but we have a great job now, let's stay here, let's stay in Aspen, she's always up for the next adventure. So she was encouraging and saying, yeah, let's move on. So we moved on to Denver. And as I said, 20 years later, here we are. And the watches have just been an amazing journey. But from early on, I had a fascination with the independent watchmakers. As soon as I met people like François Peugeot and Vianney Horta, that was it. I was fascinated. I wanted to meet all the people that were doing the real work, the people that were doing the stuff for the Breguets of the world and all the different great brands. And I became obsessed with that. And then one day we just, we got lucky. We met, obviously, Michel Parmigiani. And I was telling Michel Parmigiani, and this was over 20 years ago, about one of the watches that I'd seen that I fell in love with. It was a Breguet pocket watch that Rudolf Schultes at Breguet had shown me in the Basel Fair. And it blew me away. It was just this special piece with this hand-engraved movement that was just incredible. And I told Michel Parmigiani all about it and how it made me, it really inspired me. And he said, oh, yes, I know the piece. I made it. So that was pretty eye-opening to find out that these were the people I was starting to meet were the people that were really responsible for some of the greatest work in the industry. So ever since then, I've just been obsessed with the independents and working with the truest artists. And I guess my real reason for being has always been to try and give a window to the world for these great independent watchmakers. Now, of course, they are the rock stars of the world. Everybody knows them. But in those days, it was very, very different. So I have a question for you, Alon. When did you first sort of get into independent watchmaking, and how far into it are you these days?
This shows you're a professional podcaster because nobody asks us questions, and I should actually ignore it, but out of respect for you, and I guess that's our kinship, besides being utter watch nerds, a really true passion for watches and watchmakers, not so much the brands and makers. And you and I had many philosophical discussions about where the industry is going and that the independents should have a bigger platform. That's why I get along so well with you. Pietro Tomagier, the founder of the limited edition, Gabe and Asher from Collective Horology, etc., and all these guys around the world. Think about Michael Tay, the Hourglass Singapore. He has a big outfit, but his true passion are the independents. You were very, 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 very early on. So for me, that virus, the bug, was given to me by my dad. I remember him taking me as a kid. We always did retail safaris, and he showed me the Antiqua by Vianney Halter when that came out. I don't know if you remember that.
Of course. I sold about 4 of the first 10 pieces.
So here you go. So I just admired them. You sold them. And that says it all. Now, fast forward to today, where we're both retailers, independent multi-brand retailers, whom I hardly have any big groups left. And I believe you also very mindful took that decision together with Melissa for your business.
We have none.
None.
Zero.
Yeah. And I believe the last of the Mohicans you guys had were Zenith.
Zenith and Ulysse Nardin were the last 2 that were kind of connected to groups. Ulysse, obviously, a little different category.
Yeah. So actually today, while we record this, Zenith is the last one. And we made a major shift. So, and it's both willingly and unwillingly. And we are also going fully down the indie rabbit hole. So let's go back to you now, because it's all about you today.
All right.
Where were you bitten by the watch bug?
In Aspen, literally, with that first job. And that was when I really liked watches. And the first job that I had in Aspen in the watches was a very successful at that time jewelry store where they sold Rolex, Cartier, Breitling. So obviously I thought, this is it. This is the absolute pinnacle. Then they added Patek Philippe, and that was pretty strong. Although in those days it wasn't that exciting, to be honest. It was just another watch brand. And then they gave me kind of carte blanche a little bit to expand into some other brands. And as I proved myself in the store, the owner agreed to bring on Hublot, which I loved. It was the first watch I ever owned, was a Hublot with that natural rubber strap and the quartz movement at that time, the classic. I loved it. I knew that I could sell it, and sure enough, I did very well. And then I also had a slight obsession with Jaeger-LeCoultre, and I still have great respect for the brand. And the Reverso, I just thought was a magnificent watch with a great history, and I knew that I could sell it, and I knew I could make other people happy. And that's what it's all about. When I knew that I could sell it, and I don't know how you are, Lon, I love your opinion on this, but for me to sell, I'm very genuine about how I do it. I don't care to sell a watch to make money and to ring up the register. That doesn't appeal to me. What appeals to me is making people happy, truly. And if I know it's a good match for a person and they'll enjoy it and they can afford it, then I can feel comfortable really pushing for the sale, because I know that I'm doing them a service. And if I don't get them into the watch they love, I'm doing them a disservice. So that's how I've always felt. And I've always felt there was something like those watches. You have something unique forever. It's something a little bit different. So I always felt very comfortable selling that watch with that story and that incredible passion behind it. And anyway, so from there, I kind of expanded a little bit more. And then I had the opportunity to move to another store. They approached me, and they sold vintage watches. And pretty much that was it. It was just vintage. And Alone, I could cry right now thinking about some of the watches that passed through my hands. And I didn't really appreciate how incredible they were at the time. They were just inventory. Pieces like these incredible Vacherons from the 20s and the 40s, beautiful Pateks, these rare watches, Universal Chanel, whatever it may have been, they were just incredible. And I still think back to one or two of those pieces and how I wish I could have kept them. And I've seen a lot of those watches go in auction, and I know I recognize them because how many of them could have been made. And we sold like a whole, probably sold 3 or 4 of those beautiful Rolex with the day dates and the star dials. I forget what they're called. I don't do Rolex anymore. Was it the Padalone?
Yeah, or the Stelline dials, you mean?
Yeah, I guess so. The beautiful classic round Rolexes from the 50s. They were just beautiful, 50s and 60s. We sold a bunch of those, early Daytonas, Paul Newmans, that kind of stuff. And, I had a chance to buy a Paul Newman Daytona for $10,000. And I didn't love the watch. Plus, I didn't have the money. So that was an easy one. But it was those kind of things I can look back on now and say, wow, God, what a privilege. And the amazing thing was the education that I got. And my mentor at the time was a chap by the name of Sig Schoenholtz, one of the most unique individuals on the planet, and one of the most knowledgeable people, a third-generation watchmaker. And he just taught me so much about watches. And I didn't realize I didn't know anything about watches at the time. I'd only been selling Rolex, Cartier, Breitling. You don't have to know much about watches to sell those. You need to know about what the product is. But you don't have to know anything about the history of watches or anything. I learned from vintage. And when you start to learn the vintage, you start to learn where those people got their inspiration from. Where did it come from? And you start to explore the history. And you start to explore the watchmakers like Janvier, Leroy, and all those great watchmakers from a couple of hundred years ago, the French masters, the Swiss masters, the people that really laid the foundations for modern watchmaking. And when you see that, then you can look at new watches and you can see who's being original, who's not, who's just taking an idea they've stolen. And it's kind of a nice perspective to be able to offer as you explore the world of new watches. And for me, that's always been very, very, very crucial. So, but anyway, so getting back to the original question, that was kind of how I learned about watches, and I learned from the vintage. But I was hired to bring in new watchmakers. So we brought in Breguet. Then we brought in Audemars Piguet. And we started to explore that. And then we brought in a brand by the name of Bell & Ross, which was brand new at the time. We were the first retailer. We saw it. We liked it. We called the guy who was in charge, and his name was Pierre Halimi. And Pierre came out to Aspen, showed us the watches. We liked them. We thought they were fun. So we said, great, we'll do it. And then we became very good friends with Pierre. And the importance of telling you that is because then Pierre, being French, of course, he was friendly with a lot of different people in the industry. And he called and said, hey, you've got to come see this watchmaker. He's pretty incredible. So I said, okay, great, let's do it. And this was over during, obviously, Basel World. And we went to see this guy in this little one-room operation sort of thing. And his name was François Bourgeon. So I'm like, wow, okay. So we met him. He was working on his first watches, which were the Tourbillon Repertoire and the Resonance. And fell in love with it. Just like, wow, it's amazing. This work is incredible. And he was showing that year as well in Basel, but nobody knew who he was. So he had a tiny booth. And then we went to a dinner party, and Melissa remember. I'm looking over at Melissa now. She'll remember this night. It was pretty magical. And I believe it was François Bourgeon. We were just hanging. It wasn't a dinner party. Sorry. It was like just hanging around in a room with some wine, some Frigo chocolates, some cheese. And I mean, there with François Bourgeon, Vianney Halter, Jean-François Rouchenet, who made all the cases for Vianney, for the Antiqua. And it was this magical moment of this sort of enlightenment in front of us, this incredible energy of exciting entrepreneurial independence that was right there. And I was in my early 20s at that point. And it was magical. Alon, it was incredible. I'm here with these masters. And that was when I first sort of became really, really enamored with the true talents in the industry. And that was when I knew that was what I wanted to really do. So anyway, so we decided we wanted to sell F. Pigeon and Vianney Halter. And this will be amazing to listeners now. The owner of the store I worked for was an attorney. So he's always thinking in terms of, okay, what can go wrong? And in those days, nobody had heard of these people. Nobody had heard of F. Pigeon. Nobody had heard of Vianney Halter. And they were not using regular movements. They were doing a lot of the work themselves, most of it. So he wanted, for me to sell them, I had to get our clients to sign a waiver, a legal waiver that would ensure that we were not responsible should anything happen to the watchmaker and us not be able to repair the calibers. He wanted us to sign a waiver. That's how early this was, that nobody had heard of these watchmakers. We wanted people to trust us, but to understand what the risks were. And there were risks in those days. We had no idea what was going to happen with the watch industry. It was just emerging kind of from the quartz crisis and starting to find its legs again. But we had no idea what would happen. So that's what we had to do. We had to have people sign waivers before they bought the first F. Pigeons or the first Vianney Halters. And that was an amazing time, really fun.
I'm sitting here laid back with a coffee as if I'm listening to your podcast. So thank you for bringing the magic, because it's very early for you. So I appreciate you waking up and sitting down with me and sharing these lovely stories, because I enjoy every second of it. And it also reminds me of my dad obviously took me in Basel World always to the AHCI. And Mr. Christian van der Klauw was also one of the persons that inspired me in the same way that you're now talking about Jorn. Now, before I ask my follow-up question for our dear listeners, if you like to browse while listening, Oster you can find at osterjewelers.com, so osterjewelers.com. And if I counted correctly today, Jeremy, you have 20 brands, if I'm not mistaken. Quick rundown: Angelus, Armstrong, Arnold & Son, Bell & Ross, which you were the first one. Chapek & C. You have Dior. I kind of have a feeling Melissa has to do something with that.
Yeah, we only have a couple of Dior's left, unfortunately, because they've stopped really selling to retailers. So we have the last couple. But yes, Melissa and I both love them. They were very, very special pieces, but we just have a couple of special pieces left.
But fits the strategy because it's LVMH, right?
Yeah, but they changed their strategy. They made a big announcement and closed every retailer in the world right before the pandemic hit. I mean, another brilliant strategy from the big groups, but it was a shame because everybody involved with it was really cool. We enjoyed working with them very much. It was very unique and very beautiful. But anyway, we have a couple of special pieces left.
You're such a gentleman. So going from Dior to Philippe Pikulik, Gerald Charles, which I believe is new, Goss, which I love, Dutch Groeneveld, if I'm not mistaken, you're the first in the US, Kari Voutalainen, Crayon, Label Noir, Lederer, Louis Rar, Masséna Lab, Moritz Grossman, Nomos, we spoke about Parmigiani already, Schwarz Etienne, Singer Reimagined, Speak Marin. So basically entry level is Nomos and Louis Rar, I guess.
Yeah, you can also Bell & Ross in that, in that affordable price range.
And then you go hardcore, Horlogerie Manufacture Indie. That's the spiel. Then you guys know, listening, what the level is. So going from there, do you yourself personally collect vintage watches? As you said, it's so important for the education.
I have some vintage. I have some beautiful vintage. I wouldn't say I collect them anymore just because I don't have much access to them the way I used to. But there's a couple of pieces that Melissa would never let me sell ever because she absolutely loves them. One of them is a beautiful tonneau, but it's a really oversized tonneau. And for that era, it was huge. It was a Longines tonneau and rose gold case with this beautiful cream dial with the hand engraved numbers filled with blue enamel. And gorgeous piece. It just looks so raw. I think it dates to about 1917. And just a lovely, lovely piece to wear, which unfortunately I haven't worn it for a while. I need to really pull that out, but a beautiful piece. And actually it's the piece that ironically Longines used as the basis for a reissue watch they did a couple of years ago in that beautiful tonneau shape. I forget the name that they called it for the reissue, but anyway, it's that watch. And then I have a really spectacular oversized tank style made by Audemars Frères. So not Audemars Piguet, Audemars Frères. So there were two brothers and Audemars family, but not connected to the Audemars Piguet family. So as we know, as most people, I don't know if your listeners know, but in Switzerland, there's really like a handful of key names that are crucial in the Swiss watch industry. And it seems like everybody's related to those few names. I forget what they are, but we obviously know them from the watches, and then you got the Rochards and those kind of names. So anyway, so Audemars was a name, and they made watches for a short period of time, but beautiful quality. And this piece is spectacular, gorgeous tank with a hand engraved sort of dial, really lovely. What else? I think that's the only vintage we have. Those two pieces. Yeah. I think that's it for vintage at this time.
It seems you guys have a lot of watch brands, but on the jewelry end of things, you guys even have more brands. I know you also make your own jewelry. Please talk to me about that a bit.
Yeah, no, it's funny because we're one of the few stores, I think, that really, I mean, like yourself, obviously jewelry is very important. And it seems that most watch stores today that sell the caliber of watches we sell, they're watch stores. There's not a lot of jewelry. We've always been interested in the jewelry side of things. That's kind of how I learned initially. The first store I worked at with the Rolex Cartier Breitling, they were a jewelry store first. And in those days, for your listeners who are kind of newer to the watch trend, watches for a lot of jewelry stores were a loss leader item back then. We're talking 30 years. So obviously you've been in the family business a long time. So, you know, a lot of the times back then, jewelers would sell watches purely to keep the clients in the door, not because they were a profit center on themselves. It was really about the jewelry. Obviously, that's changed dramatically. But we have always loved jewelry, and we've always loved handcrafted jewelry and very special jewelry. And I would say our jewelry is very similar to the watches, the way we curate. It's got to really appeal to us. And Melissa has a really good eye for jewelry. So people like Savan Bichachki, for example, the Turkish jeweler, Melissa was the first to see him. And we really discovered him, I think, through, you saw, Melissa, how was it? You saw like a picture in a magazine or something of a piece? An article, so she called them up in Turkey. It was like an international magazine. She called them up in Turkey, which was blown away. And he became a very big inspirational jeweler for a number of people. And similar to that, we found this small family-owned jeweler by the name of Santa Castino, who we became very dear friends with. And they make the most extraordinary handcrafted jewelry, and a beautiful family. We saw the work. We went into their booth in Switzerland, in Basel, and it was amazing. It was just incredible. And that same passion that we feel for the watches, we definitely feel for the jewelry as well. And today we're very focused on a few jewelry lines, but we really focus on the quality, the uniqueness, the originality. And pretty much like the watches, we don't really do a whole lot of group stuff. We don't do the big mass market stuff. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But our whole reason for being is to provide a window into the world for the great artists who may be a smaller production and not as well known. We don't go in asking, how much do you spend on advertising? We go in asking, how do you make this? And that's kind of what appeals to us. So that's where we are. So yes, we have some incredible jewelry. We've always got special pieces. We used to do a lot of Italian jewelry back before the financial crash, when the Italian jewelry really ruled the world. And it's a shame to kind of see that it's still beautiful, but it's not the same as it was. It's made differently, but we still have a lot of the original Italian jewelry because we bought as much as we could back then. So great brands like Stefan Hafner, the people that really created the foundations for modern jewelry.
How big is the physical store?
Our store is very small. It's about 1,000 feet. So we cram, it's crammed full with the things we love, I guess. And it's 1,000 feet, but we don't feel that we have to do everything. We're not going to be everything to everybody. We make our choices, and we do bridal, but it's not the focal point by any means. It's really about the jewelry. It's about it's about the beautiful passion. So on the bridal side, for example, we discovered the work of a jeweler by the name of Catherine James, who sadly passed away. But her work blew us away. We didn't really have bridal at that time because we never found anything we liked. And if we don't find something we love, we're not going to sell it. I'd rather have a gap in our inventory than sell something we don't care about. And Catherine James just blew us away with the quality. It's just amazing. So we bought as much as we could after she passed away. And, sadly, there won't be any more, but gladly we represent it now. And anybody who buys a piece of her jewelry is just going to be thrilled for life, truly. And one or two jewelers like that. And that's how it goes. And coming back to the conversation, when you started about going through our lines, and yes, we have No More Spell and Ross, and then there might be a large gap price-wise, although Felipe Picalic, he starts at 7,500. So we hope that fills a little bit with the classic. And actually, the classics have been selling very well. We're actually pre-sold on the next couple of pieces. But the problem is, Alana, and this is where, if you want to give us some input here, there's nothing I love in that $10,000 to $15,000 range. I would love to have it in the store, but there is just nothing I love at this point. So it's not that I don't want it, we just don't have it.
The TRTS fam is at your service.
Please.
For everyone listening, please post what brands you think Melissa and Jeremy should retail. I will summarize that all in the email, or even better, hereby, Jeremy, you're invited to be part of the TRTS community. We have many retailers, Hans Peter Piet, the CEO of Bayer. We have Pietro in there, and several more. So let's do that either in part 2 of the recording, because I'm a chatterbox. You definitely are a chatterbox. I want to keep this under 1 hour, but hereby extend you for a second visit on the show, because I have a zillion more questions. So I want to speed things up a little bit. Jeremy, 1,000 feet is 100 square meters. I reckon that, like us, we always say we're a local hero with global presence. I assume in the US you can take phone orders and you ship all around North America. Do you have international customers you cater to that won't physically visit you?
Yes. Well, actually, one of our biggest international customers, who's become a very dear friend, and I actually love them. The family's beautiful. They have such a great appreciation for watches. They actually came to see us. They'd seen an article on our store in one of the watch magazines a few years ago, and they actually cut it out and put it in a file, knowing that if they ever came to Colorado, to Denver, they'd want to come see us. So they came in and we met them, and it was just a wonderful opportunity to meet them. And we were so thrilled and honored that they made the effort to come see us. And we've been in touch ever since. And they've obviously acquired some wonderful, wonderful pieces. And they're international, of course. We've got a few other international clients, a few in England and all over the place. And obviously we do the podcast as well. So that brings us some clients from, we've had people listening from Australia, I think Kuala Lumpur, places that I would have imagined would have found us, but they found us. So that's great. But yes, we have a lot of clients all over America. And one of the reasons we chose actually Denver was because it's actually pretty central. And in Aspen, we have clients. Nobody lives in Aspen, especially at that time. So everybody was from somewhere else. So my client base was from all over the country initially. So a lot of those clients that I knew back then, I still work with very much now. So we have clients literally all over the country. And so a lot of what we do, we obviously cater to our local clientele, who is fantastic. But a lot of what we do, especially since the pandemic, I would guess probably 60 to 70% of the watches we sell go outside of Colorado.
Talk to me about all the collabs you've done and what's in the pipeline that you can share with us.
Collabs, it's always I don't really have a great plan about how we do things. It's kind of like, how do I feel at that moment? And does something come up that seems right for that time? And an example of that would be Arm & Strom, for example. So the first really proper collab we did was with Arm & Strom on the Gravity Equal Force. And I remember Claude came out to Denver and showed me the piece before launch. And I looked at it, I thought it was beautiful, but it had that beautiful, simple sort of background. And I looked at it and my eye immediately saw a guilloche background. I said, there's so much negative space, we could be using that for guilloche. So I said, I want to do something with guilloche. Can we do a special edition? And I wasn't thinking about doing a collab. It was just what I saw for a watch. And we decided to do a special edition of 10 pieces. And Kari Voutilainen's factory did the guilloche work on the plate. And that was the first Gravity Equal Force made with a guilloche plate. And then since then, they've gone on to do a lot of collaborations with a lot of different guilloche. But we did that first. And it was just purely what I saw. And what I love about working with people like Arm & Strom and Claude is that you say, can we do something? The answer is yes. Why not? Try doing that with the big brands and the groups. It's very, very challenging. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. They have a clear focus of what they're doing, which I totally admire. But I love the spontaneity. I love having an input on it. I love knowing that there's a bit of control in what we sell. And if I see something visually in my head, it's a possibility to make it happen. So that was how that started. So we did that. And Hodinkee actually were very, very helpful with that. They published an article on us at that time about the store. That was the time of the pandemic. And so people got some awareness. And then Quill and Pad actually wrote a really nice article on that watch. So a shout out to Quill and Pad, who I think is one of the best blogs out there and superb. If you don't know it, go on to it. And their writing is superb, really good. So they wrote an article and published pictures of that first Arm & Strom, and the phone started ringing. That was April of whenever the pandemic broke out, April of 2020. And that was when things changed, really. And that was when the pandemic, independence, all those things took off for watches, and it was incredible. So other collabs we've done, further collabs with Claude at Arm & Strom. They've always been very well received. The most recent was the Resonance piece we did with Horror Mario Bro as a collab. And again, that was a very natural collaboration. So Horror Mario Bro, I know because sold him a watch or two. We actually were the first to do Josh Shapiro watches, Gio Shapiro. And we had one piece, and Horror Mario Bro purchased it, and we became kind of friendly from that. And then he actually ended up acquiring my personal first Armin Strong piece, the first collaboration, which I'd then sold because I got a Resonance. So he ended up with my personal piece, which was just ironic. And then he decided he wanted a Resonance, so he reached out to me, and we started talking about what the possibility was to create it. And the idea just literally just took off. It became so natural. And we decided this is too cool to make one piece. So we decided let's make 10 pieces and do a collaboration with Horror Mario Bro, because I love his Instagram page. It's a great page. He does these great macro close-ups, these great exposures of different elements of all different details. So we did that collaboration with him, and we let him market it. We let him push it on his Instagram first and kind of own the idea that he was involved in the watchmaking process, which seemed right at the time. So it was a great collaboration. And then we've done a few other collabs. Obviously, Schwartz Etienne. We did the Evergreen piece, and that was beautiful, beautiful green guilloche dial with Kari, of course, and a few other things. And then in the pipeline, what do we have? I have to think about this one. I got a couple of things I'm working on, but can't say yet. But it's been fun. But if anyone's interested, we do still have, I think, one Horror Mario Bro edition left, and I think one of the Schwartz Etienne as well.
What about the Grossman you guys did?
Ah, yes, the Morris Grossman. That was beautiful. So they, thank you. Glad someone's doing the research here. So they did this beautiful turquoise guilloche dial with Kari, and I thought it was stunning. And it was a limited edition, I think of either 18 or 28 pieces, I forget which. It was 18 pieces. And I looked at it, and I knew it would sell out immediately. So they allocated us, I think, 2 pieces. But at the same time, when they launched it, well, pre-launch, I asked them, I said, wow, I love this piece. What about doing a special edition for us? Would you do something? So they agreed to do an ice blue version for us, and there were 8 pieces in the series, and yeah, just exquisitely beautiful. But they have all obviously sold out. They're all in fine homes now. Beautiful piece. What else have I done, Alon? It seems that you know more than I do.
Well, no, and I actually didn't do research because I am basically a consumer consuming everything that the Oster team does. So I remember those stood out to me. Let's talk about brands. So what is new at Oster?
I tried to be very consistent, to be honest, because we've had, obviously, Bell & Ross ever since we opened. We've had Parmigiani ever since we opened. So we tend to be pretty loyal. And actually, Chapek's a good example. I mean, we were actually the first retailer in America to carry Chapek. And I think we were the second in the world. So we were very early on with Chapek as well. But I loved what they did. Oh, yeah, we did a collaboration with them. We did the Blue Panda chronograph with Chapek, was the first collaboration we did. And that was the first watch we sold from Chapek, and that did very well. There were 18 pieces in the series, and that was very good. And then we actually did an Antarctique collaboration for our 20th anniversary, and that was cool. We've got, I think, 1 piece left, so thanks for reminding me of that. And that was a cool piece, beautiful dial. And nowadays we have a really strong focus on brands that we truly believe in. And 1 or 2 that are on our list may not really be there long term. We don't have a lot of watches in them, but we're very committed to who we're going forward with. And Gerald Charles is a new name, so we'll see how that goes. We've still got to see if our customers love them. So that will also be the determining factor. We can feel strongly about a brand, but the customer has to love it. But I think so far the indications have been very strong. We've already pre-sold the Tourbillon. We've got a couple of pieces pre-sold. So I think it'll do very well. So the shape is beautiful. It has a great feel on the wrist. So I feel very good about it. Felipe Pekalik, he's new for us. So far it's done very well. But the success of that, for me, will also be partly very much down to whether he can actually deliver watches to us at the pace that we're hoping for. So that will be the determining factor there. And new is the bigger one, I'd say, that is not on the website yet, is Renault Tissier, which is worthy of a whole other podcast completely, but something I think is quite extraordinary and I think could be the next truly hot watch. So I'm going to throw that out there now. But that's something pretty extraordinary that we're obviously the first to sell those in America. And what else did we pick up? Let's think. We've got the new GOS. You mentioned GOS. We've got the brand new Sarek Frost coming in this month, so that's fun. So again, it's about finding watches that you like. And what I love about the independents, and you can speak to this, Alon, is with the independents, you can pick and choose what you want to carry. If you love this piece, great. Like, for instance, I look at Chapek, and it's a very tight allocation. If I say no to any watch, another retailer is going to be thrilled because they get to pick up my allocation. But there's never anything forced, never says you have to take this piece. It's a question of we want these pieces because our customers want them. They're very small numbers. Please give them to us. So it's a very different situation. And what I didn't like often about working with the groups is you feel this incredible pressure to keep on stocking every single variation of every single piece. And that's great for a retailer who has a very large sort of local traffic come in, and a high traffic. If you're in a mall, for example, it's great. But for a store like ours, which is smaller, it just really didn't work for me in that way. It just put a lot more stress on having to run the business in a way that is not catering to my clients, but catering to the wills of those vendors, if you like.
What I notice as a elegant Englishman, there are no English brands. I officially don't call Arnold & Son English. I mean, it's an old English brand, obviously. But is there a reason, or didn't the stars align and it just simply didn't work out to carry those brands that you admire?
Well, I was working with Peter Spink-Marin for many years before he sold his company, of course. So Peter was English. And so I was very happy working with that. I loved the English story. The name of the case is obviously Piccadilly. So there was a definite connection there. There's never been any sort of agenda like I have to carry this, I have to not carry that. It's all about the product. And we used to do an incredible business with Bremont. And I love Nick and Giles. We had a lot of fun. So I love that English element there. So I very strong with them. But that kind of didn't work out for the last few years. They kind of changed the way they want to do business with their brand. And I wish them all the great success in the world. Still love those guys. And I hope the brand does very well. But where the brand is heading today, hopefully works brilliantly for them, but it didn't really work for the direction we were doing. So again, I loved the earlier days when they were doing some extraordinary limited editions, like the HMS Victory, the Code Breaker. So those pieces were just extraordinary. And we did very, very well. I think we were one of their top 2 retailers in America, and we sold a lot of the high-end limited editions they did. And it was great fun. So I was very happy and very proud. Mike Pearson, who was the rep at that time, was a very dear friend. So he'd come into town. We'd have a gin and tonic night with our clients. So yeah, I enjoyed that British thing. I would love it. But I don't know who's out there today that really fits the bill that would make me say, yeah, I want to do this. So I'm hoping that British watchmaking continues to evolve the way it has been, because it is quite exciting. And there are a few out there. So we'll see. You never know. But yeah, I'd love it.
So the first brand that comes to mind for me is, for example, Garrick. Is that something that you would consider?
Yes, I certainly would not consider them. Garrick, I think they're doing some great work. Just, some of it, as you know, I mean, how do I know you, Alon? I know you because I do Keeping Time podcast. You listened to it, you found it, you reached out to me. The stars aligned. We became friends through that. There has to be a connection there. And when it came to picking up actually Bremont, somebody else in the industry told me you should really go look at these guys. So I had no idea who they were. I went to look at them. I liked it. Great. Hit it off. So Garrick, for some reason, they've never reached out to me. I've never seen them at a show. I don't know where they are. it just hasn't really happened. There's no reason for it other than things happen generally very organically in my life. It's the way it is. I mean, there's been a couple of watch brands where literally I've seen them on Instagram. Josh Shapiro is one of them. I saw his Guilloche work on Instagram a few years ago, and I know enough about the industry and watches. I saw what he was doing, and I immediately knew that is remarkable. That's fantastic. So I reached out to him on Instagram. He's such a lovely chap. He reached right. He started a chat immediately. We got on the phone. And then I'm like, wow, this is such a great story. Let's save this and let's have it, on the podcast. So we did a podcast, and then on the podcast, I decided, right, I want to commit to this guy. I want to support him. So that's how it happened, very organically. So it's just things like that happen. Felipe as well. Felipe Pekalik, I saw his work on Instagram. Hadn't really seen it in the flesh, and I just loved it. I reached out to him on Instagram. We had a Zoom call. I liked what he's doing. I liked everything. Our missions align. Our objectives align, and that works, And if he says, I need you to sell 100 watches a year, that may not align for me because I'm not going to commit to that kind of level, here, now. It's not going to happen. You got to start slowly and build it up and see how the clients like it. And I've worked with brands where I've started out with just a few watches, and then we've turned it into a very, very healthy business. But you got to start in a way that makes sense. It's the way I do things. So to answer your question, very much organic is how things happen.
I see 3 patterns here. Any business is people's business. I'm exactly the same way. You're very organic indeed, that you'll go by the flow. David Brailsford, if you're listening, you need to get on a plane to Denver. I highly recommend it. And third, every brand whomever wants to work with Jeremy and Melissa, make sure that you do guilloche. Because I see that's a passion of yours. Am I correct? I'm seeing a pattern here, Jeremy.
I've always liked guilloche, but it's not really I'm not a complete sucker for guilloche at all. It's if it's really done well, then yes, I love it. But it's really more about the artisanship. It's about the craftsman. So with Josh Shapiro, I recognize the guilloche work he does. Great. With Felipe Pekalik, I recognize the finishing he was doing and the work he was doing to create his own beautiful bridge work and the finishing he was doing there. So it's more about that. He doesn't really do a lot of guilloche, if any. So it's more about just the whole. What I want to see is when I look at a watch, I want to see in the collection, if I took the name off of the dial, would I recognize each and every watch that there is a reason for it being a part of the collection? Or if I took the name off, would I not be able to recognize that watch? And there are too many watches out there, which we don't need to name. There are a lot of phenomenal watches with a great presence, identity. They're fabulous. But there are some where if you took the name off, you wouldn't know who made that watch. To me, you've got to be able to recognize the quality of the craftsmanship without the name on that dial. And that to me is very, very crucial. So if you're doing something extraordinary and it makes sense and I can see originality in and there's a passion, then that's what drives me, because then I know it will have longevity. If you're relying on a designer to come up with a hot watch this year, if that designer leaves, the brand's in trouble. So I want to see the leadership from the top. I want to see the passion. It doesn't necessarily have to be one incredible watchmaker. It just has to be something where I can see there's an obvious reason for them existing. And it has to appeal to me. And the other thing is, would I wear it? If I would wear the watch, then I'm happy. If I wouldn't wear the watch, why would I expect my clients to wear it?
Very, very good philosophy. Let's talk about trends, brands to watch out for, watchmakers on the rise. You can talk as a watch nerd, as a retailer. Who do you think the listeners should look out for?
Oh, good question. I mean, it's such a broad industry. And I think the independents, there are so many people there that are doing some great work. There's some people I'd love to work with, but they working, obviously directly with the consumer now. People like Rexepi, of course. And I was actually the first retailer to work with him, Akrivia, Rexep. And now he's going direct because, he's making so few watches. Why not? It just makes sense for him. And I understand it completely. So he's having great success. So people have an eye on him for sure. Who else is doing really great work? There's quite a few out there. Oh my God, what's the name of the brand? Peterman Beta. I think their work is incredible. I've reached out to them, but again, they're going direct, but I think their work is superb, doing some spectacular stuff. Raul, I could never pronounce it. I always want to say Pages. Pages, yeah, however you say it. And I first saw him, at the AHCI, over in Baselworld many years ago, and his work blew me away. And lovely chap, he's doing some fabulous work, and I think his most recent watch aesthetically just absolutely appeals to me with that beautiful blue sub-seconds dial as a contrast to the silver. And I just love that. That inspires me. It's just a beautiful work, and I'm really pleased to see what he's doing and achieving. Would I love to sell it in my store? Yes, I would love to, but sometimes you just got to appreciate the work for what it is. It may not have the option of working with it myself, because he's obviously working directly with his clients, which is great. But there are people like that, I think, doing great work. V&A Halter, always love V&A. And his new piece is just incredible. He's got a new classic with a very much a New York sort of deco feel. So pure deco elements, but it's not a theme. It's a capturing of the elements that make that whole design era so strong. And he's done it so well. It's not cliched. It's original. It's creative. And it's kind of taking the V&A Halter Classic to the next level. And fortunately, I do work with V&A, so he's agreed to work with me on a couple of pieces. But it's a long way out. So we're going to, we'll obviously get a couple of pieces, but who knows how long it'll take for that. So in terms of people, I mentioned Renaud Tissier. I think that's a brand you definitely want to keep an eye on, people doing some amazing work. The people behind it are incredible. And Gerald Charles really, really intrigues me, because being the last great design of the greatest designer of modern watchmaking, obviously Genta here, it's important. And the design on the wrist, it works. It's distinctive. I love distinctive, but I don't like a distinctive design just for the sake of it. I like a distinctive design because it makes sense and actually offers something unique and different that really is cohesive as a design. And when you put it on the wrist, it's hard to take it off. It feels great, beautiful quality, lovely size. I really am impressed with it, and just really wonderful things.
Holistically, movement internally, design, or is it really the symbiosis of the two?
It's got to be the symbiosis of everything. And I think I think that's a great question. And it comes down to resources, a lot of it. And I think early on, and you will know this as well as anybody, Alon, you used to go to the AHCI. You would see people there. And I'm definitely not going to name names, but there was a couple of watchmakers at the AHCI, and you can see all their resources. And by resources, it could be time, it could be attention, it could be desire. It doesn't have to be money necessarily. But all the resources went into the movement, and that's all that mattered. The design of the dial often was not so much, not so good. So that would let them down somewhat. But the movement was incredible. But to me, what makes the great brands great and what makes the great watchmakers great is there's a cohesiveness between the design of the dial and the movement. You look at an Audemars Piguet, of course, the Royal Oak's very distinctive, but the design is there, is clear, and you accept that it's Audemars Piguet, so the movement's going to be of that level. Now, you look at the independents, and I think today we've seen such a different world of independents than were a few years ago, because a few years ago, the independents didn't have access to the same level of dial makers as they do now. It wasn't the same option to be able to have that level of finish on the dial or on the cases. The case makers were busy making the cases for the big brands. They wouldn't even talk to the independents who needed 5 cases. So now it's a different world that the independents are very strong and they have the resources available to them to create a refined product that is refined on every level. There is nothing wanting about them. And so to answer your question, it's got to be everything. When you have the watch on your wrist, you're obviously looking at the dial. That dial's got to be beautiful. I'm looking at the dial first. That's got to please me. It's got to be beautiful. If the movement's sensational, but the dial is nothing great, or the case is not comfortable, it lacks something. You can appreciate it and say, I love what he's doing. I'll keep an eye on him and hopefully he'll get to where we want to be. But I think it's got to be a complete 100% perfect watch from the dial to the case to the movement.
And now, dear listeners, you know why I love Jeremy and his podcast so much, because he has the trifecta, the golden triangle: elegant and soothing voice, sheer passion, and knowledge, because you get schooled on every episode. I kind of need to wrap it up, Jeremy, but I have one question that begs an answer. You've talked about going direct, and you understand that these high priests of independent horology, I call them new kids on the block, need to go direct. They simply can't supply enough for the demand. But today we live in a world where everybody does D2C, direct to consumer. Do you think that us, and I believe we're a dying species, independent multi-brand readers, have a right of existence the coming decade?
Yes. It's the short answer.
And why?
Because we offer an expertise and we offer a relationship that we already have with the clients. So we offer something that the watchmakers do need. And there are still watchmakers out there who want to become brands. They're not selling individual watches. And yes, just about everybody's going D2C, but some customers still want to have that relationship. And as much as anything, there are customers who I'm sure you do, I have a number of customers who know infinitely more than I do about the watches today. They know more technical details than I do. They know more than I do, period. I have a perspective, though, over things that most people don't have, and I can offer expertise. Now, the big thing is, for those customers, I can gain access to certain watchmakers that otherwise they would not have access to, because I still have those relationships in the industry, whether it be Grönfeld or Voutilainen, etc. So I do offer something special there for me. But the big thing for you, me, all the other independent retailers that specialize in these watches is that we have a lot of clients who are busy working and making money, and that's their job. Their job is not to research the watches. Their job is to do what they do, take care of their families, take care of their businesses. What we do is we can advise, we know their taste. We can tell them, we have seen this watch. You didn't go to Geneva. We did. I've seen it on my wrist. Trust me, you'll love it. And they trust us because they've known us for however many years. And that relationship is vital for a great many clients. And I hope that that never, ever ends, because if that does, then it's just a commodities business. And we're not in the business of commodities, you and I especially. We're in the business of beautiful products, whether it be watches or jewelry, and relationships. Relationships are what make this business what they are. You and I, the people we know, the people we enjoy. One thing we learned during the whole COVID time and the pandemic is that we missed relationships. And that is crucial. And that's why I think we're still going to be very important.
Don't believe me, but believe Jeremy. Thank you so much. And you can reach Jeremy by simply typing his first name at osterjewelers.com. Jeremy spelled Jeremy. You can find him obviously on Instagram as well. I don't know who answers the DMs, but it's Oster Watches, at Oster Watches. Do you reply to them or your team, Jeremy?
We'll see it. So it depends on what it is, but oftentimes it's me.
But if you want to reach Jeremy, he's very responsive. You've heard it, why you need to reach out to them. I highly recommend them, even though I'm a retailer. Thank you so much, Jeremy. I really appreciate it. It was long due, but I appreciate you sitting down with me, and I really hope you'll come back on the show.
Well, I would love to. Alon, thanks so much for the invitation. I'm so truly honored that you would invite me onto your show. So first of all, congratulations on the success and the consistency of your show. And it is fantastic. I listen to it all the time. It is really superb. So I appreciate what you are doing and what you've always done with relationships in the industry. And you are vital to me. And I'm very happy to know you. And I appreciate it.
You're too kind. Don't forget to send me an invoice for all these credits you're giving me. You can find all the episodes on our official website, www.therealtime.show. And you can find us on Instagram at therealtime.show. If you want to support the show, please subscribe, like, rate, and share it with your friends. If you have any questions, feedback, and or criticism, please do send us a message. You can also DM us if you want to join the TRTS community. You can reach David via Instagram at DAVAUCHER. Rob, you can find at ROBNUDDS. And me, you can find at ALONBENJOSEPH. And if you prefer to send us an email, you can just add our first name to at therealtime.show, like our IG handle. Stay sane and keep on ticking.